Hey everyone. So I want to go through the bioethics analysis document with you and kind of assist you through it. Well, in regards to the Oscar Pistorius man, fastest man article that we were working through. So hopefully, again, you remember it from yesterday, which is today for me. Um, but yesterday. So if you're not so sure, go back, pause this video, and reread the scenario so that you are refamiliarized with the case. Okay. Um, Moving on, though, at the very bottom of the article, so I can flip my screen so I see that here. Down at the bottom, at the end, it gives us our ethical question that we are going to be researching. And I talked about this yesterday too. But um, sometimes in some bioethics cases, actually many, right, there are different ways you can interpret it and several different bioethical questions that could arise. So um, you might need to um, if you're working on a committee like this IAAF are the decision makers. They determine what the specific um, ethical question is that they are going to be exploring in their decision making, right? So, long story short, right? um, our bioethical question that we are exploring here is whether or not Oscar Pistorius can compete in the Olympics. And by the end of it, you're going to be able to make your recommendation and tell me why. Okay. So be prepped for that. I'm going to skip back to my article analysis. I typed in everything that goes along with this and I'll share it with you so that you have access to it in an example. Um, so that when you're working through your homework assignment, um, hopefully it's a little bit easier when you have multiple examples in front of you. Um, okay, so I talked about the ethical question, right? You're going to identify one, or maybe there's different components to one overarching ethical question. In this case, should he be allowed to compete in the Olympics? The next step is then laying out all the relevant facts. And sometimes, like we have the case study in front of us, so we can kind of just dive straight into that case study and pull out the relevant facts. But oftentimes, um, groups and associations will then have to do a little further research, and they literally are just taking this one step and talking about the facts. It's really easy to get distracted and start thinking about your opinions or maybe biases, um, and asking questions about each of these facts. But the first step is just to lay them all out there to ensure you know what is what regarding the case. And so, what's considered to be a relevant fact? Um, and I think I have this right here. So, Tadashi. Um, here it is. The relevant facts are going to be biological, physiological, sociological, economic, and historical facts that you need to think of carefully um, in regards to that ethical question and when you come up with your final decision. So, any biological, physiological, sociological, economic, or historical fact. So, I'm just going to bounce back and break down Oscar's case with you and the relevant facts that I tried to do my best to come up with a whole range of them so we can kind of see. Again, at the beginning, it talks about how he was born without fibulas, how his parents decided to make the decision to have both of his legs amputated so that he could eventually get to the point where he could learn to walk with prosthetics. Otherwise, if they had not done that amputation process, he would have been wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. Some other relevant facts: he's an excellent track athlete and he maintains his health and his strength and tries to improve his running ability on the regular. He was fitted with prosthetics to help him walk, and he wears those artificial limbs called cheetahs, which are made of carbon fiber when he's running. Other relevant facts: we know we have the Paralympics, which is an alternative athletic competition for differently abled bodies. We also know we have the Olympics, um, which also encompasses the being able to show off athletic ability, but they are two separate entities right now, and those with prosthetics participate in the Paralympics? Okay. He competed in the Paralympics and set world records in the track events, multiple track events, right? And so now he requests to compete in the Olympics. And the other relevant fact that is out there is that scientists said right at the end there, it's unclear whether those cheetah prosthetics actually make athletes run faster. Um, and so it's unclear if it's an advantage or a disadvantage at this point. Okay. The next section that we're going to be looking at is focusing on who or what could be affected and how that question is resolved. So the who or what are identified as stakeholders in bioethics case studies. And these who's and what'sies are not necessarily always people or groups of people, like our IAAF or our Oscar Pistorius. Sometimes um, it depends on the scenario, but we could be talking about other organisms like plants and animals or microorganisms, or we could be talking about, the environment and the impact that the solution of this bioethics case would have on the environment. So these stakeholders also, have things to gain and lose from these decisions. So try and think of multiple um, people or things involved that can be affected by it. So I put Oscar, but I also listed like all athletes, right? Whether they're able bodied or differently abled, um, all athletes will potentially be affected by the decision of whether or not he can participate in the or in the Olympics, excuse me. And from there, if that's the case and they, rule in his favor, this has implications on all other sports competitions and who um, can participate and, modifications to rules and regulations and that sort of thing. Coaches and referees, those that are, you know, um, enforcing those rules and regulations, those people also are affected by the decision. And then this one is also important, thinking about all other young children who are thinking about their future opportunities, their ability to participate in athletics or sports or other, competitions and activities. And maybe even their families, where they will look at these considerations that Oscar and his family did, where they made their decision to amputate his legs early so that he had opportunities that maybe he wouldn't have had otherwise, right? So that's another who or what scenario. Okay. Um, Next up are what are the relevant ethical considerations? So I'm going to go actually to my slides here so that you can see that. And here's my stakeholders piece. But relevant ethical considerations. So these are particular concepts in ethics that can help you analyze that case study. And I'm going to jump to, so there's 4 that we're going to look at. Um, and I'm just going to highlight the first 2 and then I'll go through some examples with Oscar's case with you, and then I'll jump back and do the last 2. So the first one is respect for persons. And kind of the definition for that is actually, even before I get into that, when you are identifying these ethical considerations, you kind of want to look on both sides of the results. So if you rule in favor of Oscar to allow him to compete in um, the Olympics, that's one thing. But if you rule against him, that's another thing. And we're looking at different areas that still allow us to be respectful for that person or that can maximize the benefits of the decision and minimize the harms. And so sometimes, um, and so it's really important to try and look at both sides of the issue of what happens when you say, you say yes to the decision or you say no. So respect for persons basically is going through and the definition for you is not treating someone as a mere means to a goal or an end to your goal or end. Um, and basically, we're not going to interfere with the person's ability to make and carry out their decisions, um, but more so enabling that person to make choices and support them in their choices that they're making. So we want to be respectful for that person and their decisions. Harms and benefits, again, like I said, the end goal of making a final decision on a bioethical case is to really try to maximize the benefits and minimize the harms. So um, to lessen the negative outcomes and promote the positive outcomes. Uh, so the breakdown of that is basically we're going to focus on promoting positive consequences and lessening negative consequences. So try to do no harm if possible, but usually there are some sort of negative outcomes that come from it. So trying to balance that out and do the best that we possibly can, do the best, do the goodest. Okay. Um, and so there's this example in here. Even if a physician can't help a patient directly, he or she should avoid actions that cause harm or do no harm in sometimes in certain situations. Okay. So let's go back to our article and talk about respect for persons and harms and benefits as it applies to old Oscar Pistorius. Scrolling down. Okay. So again, exploring harms and benefits and respect for persons. So what I did is I laid out, the respect for persons consideration if we're ruling in the favor. So everything on top half of each of these is going to represent ruling in the favor of allowing him to compete, and then anything on the bottom half is going to be focused on going against and saying no, he cannot compete in the Olympics. So respecting him and his decision making and what he has done. So if you're ruling in favor, you would be saying he's an athlete. He can follow his dreams and compete at the highest level in the Olympics if he qualifies based off of, other rules and regulations and time trials, etc. But if you rule against him, we're still going to, respect him as an athlete. He can still follow his dream and compete at the highest level, but within the Paralympics. So we're still respecting his, um, you know, athletic competitions. We're not taking away things from him just because of, XYZ. So the next one, harms and benefits, again, looking at the decision and how it could maximize benefits and minimize harms, or have more positive outcomes than negative outcomes. So if we rule in the favor of Oscar Pistorius, he can benefit because he has the opportunity to test himself against the best in the world, or just his presence of being in the Olympics is going to help to erase the lines between people with physical disabilities and those without. Right. So those are some examples of how we're increasing and maximizing benefits. Right. And there's more in there for you to look at. I just don't want to make a video that's 30 minutes long because I'm talking about bullet points. If we make a decision that goes against that ruling where we're saying no, he cannot participate, this is where this is going to explore the harms and benefits that go with the maybe negative decision. I don't know if I want to say it that way, but anyway. So if he qualifies to compete, in the Olympics. He might be taking a spot away from an athlete who's already been training and spending, all of their life dedicated to their sport in the Olympics. So that could be a harm to that person. What do I want to say? Oh yeah, by him, this next bullet point has a lot of pieces to it, but I think it's really good at looking at harms and benefits as well. If he's participating in the Olympics, he's already a top athlete in the Paralympics. He's almost undermining the Paralympics already and saying, they aren't good enough. They actually are inferior to the Olympics. And by um, um, wanting to participate in the Olympics, he's indirectly saying that the Paralympics are not good enough. And that might have a negative impact, or that attitude might reflect negatively on the Paralympics and all those athletes that are participating in the games for the Paralympics. So that does harm to athletes, the institution's reputation, that sort of thing. Excuse me. Okay. Um, Gotta remember where it was. So there could be a little harm that's being occurring from that decision. If we were to rule in his favor, the negative impacts that could come from it, and the subtleties of saying that the athletes and that Paralympic institution is inferior. Um, the next one that I explored was just talking about if he's participating in the Olympics, then other athletes might start exploring where's the limitation and where does it end, and what's acceptable or not when you are participating in the Olympics. So other athletes might be exploring other training risks that could potentially be harmful for them, or others. So like performance enhancing drugs, or if he's using these cheetahs, what's considered to be technology, and is this competition going to be about like engineering and technology versus physical achievements and skill level. So that's another area to explore versus harms and benefits, and there's a few more listed there. Okay, our last two, like I said, I want to lay them all out for you. Are talking about fairness and authenticity. So fairness again, can we share the benefits, the resources, the cost allocations, everything equitably, and ensure fairness for all stakeholders and things involved? So sometimes what is fair um, might be described as giving each person an equal amount of something, and other times it's providing according to that person's need or according to that person's merit or contribution. So the second half is more of the equitable piece, um, versus equal, as described above. And then authenticity is looking at like the value, the nature of the sport, or like um, yeah, those are the two main terms that I describe for authenticity. Um, but the general nature of whatever topic you are exploring, or the value of that topic. So, achieving a goal in a manner consistent with what is valued about that performance and seen as essential or true to its nature. So, again, the word authentic might be used in this area. Um, And so, what's highly valued or intrinsically important or true for that topic? So, for example, we're talking about basketball. What if climbing a ladder to get to the basketball um, through the hoop would not be considered an authentic way to play basketball, right? Some people might agree beforehand that to create a new game called ladder basketball would be the use of the latter without such a change to the rules or the authentic nature of the original game. Um, but you couldn't just like throw a ladder into the original game of basketball and think that there are no implications that go along with it and no changes to the um, actual nature of the game, right? So, how can we be authentically true when we make our decisions? So, going back to our analysis here for fairness and authenticity, um, again, going back and saying, hey, um, remember those engineers, those scientists disagreed over whether or not it actually made him run faster or maybe put him at a disadvantage. Um, and if it was, a small advantage to speed, there's not that's not any different from the fact that um, our able-bodied athletes have these highly engineered track shoes that they use, or the pants that they're wearing, um, allow them to be more aerodynamic, right? There's no unfair advantage in that. Um, Again, fairness, he's gonna come overcome lots of different obstacles to get to where he was with his athletic endeavors. And so it's unfair to discriminate against him based off of the malformation or the surgery or the prosthetic legs that he has. It's unfair to disqualify him from racing because he still has to train and compete and do that. He can't just throw his, cheetahs on and get running. Another area of fairness to explore is to not discriminate based off of irrelevant characteristics. So, nationality, sexual orientation, those are irrelevant characteristics. And the fact that he has prosthetic legs could also be an irrelevant consideration. And so his athletic ability, which is the authentic, um, fair piece to be looking at, should be the focus. On the other flip side of things, again, engineers are disagreeing of whether or not those carbon fiber blades allow him an advantage. So it could be unfair. Um, his physical disability means he can't, if he can't compete in those Olympic games, that's unfortunate, but it's not unfair because he still has the opportunity to participate in the Paralympic Games where other able bodied athletes don't have that option. Sorry, all sorts of distractions during this video. So again, looking at the fairness, looking at fair actions, fair policies, and making sure that um, we're sharing benefits and resources and that sort of thing. So I was talking about how um, he's that top caliber athlete in the Paralympics, and he can still compete in there, and that has to deal with a range of disabilities, but um, that was the original intention, to allow athletes with disabilities an opportunity to compete. And if he's participating in the Olympics, that could be unfair to other athletes because he might qualify and take away a spot from another athlete who's been training the whole entire time. Um, and then he has that opportunity, like I said before, where he could be in the Olympics and he could be in the Paralympics, where as able-bodied athletes only have the freedom of participating in the Olympics. And then our last little area is talking about authenticity. Again, like I said, what makes the sports performance authentic, um, or what might make it inauthentic. So the motto for the Olympics, faster, higher, stronger. And so there's nothing in there talking about how, carbon fiber blades can be used, and that might go against the spirit of the games. However, if Pistorius participates, his dedication, the obstacles he overcame to get here, those are all positive aspects of his athletic integrity, and inspires others, and would be entertaining, which does go along with the spirit of the Olympic Games. And if he does participate, other people might strive for excellence because of his participation. On the other hand, the Olympic Games have focused on physical abilities, nurturing talents through training and discipline, and not talking about any enhancements or usage of um, other technologies that might impact the sport of the game. So that would not be normal um, to the spirit of the game, right? Again, we're no longer focusing on natural gifts and talents. We might be looking at enhanced capabilities in technology and engineering capabilities, where we're taking away from that spirit of the game, and it could lead to the interest in taking sports enhancing drugs, or something along those lines, because of the different opportunities that um, this brings about. So based off of all that information, I want you to come up with a recommendation as to whether or not you think Oscar should participate in the Olympics and why, and try and tie back to some of these areas on, is it authentic to the game? Why or why not? Is it fair to all people involved? Are we maximizing benefits and minimizing harms? And are we respecting all people or stakeholders involved in this situation. So make your decision. And you've got an example, a big example one here for one. And you're going to explore another athletic related one with Carl's case. So as you're working through, you're going to do the same thing and actually lay out each of these um, analyses pieces and do your very best to list as many as you can. Obviously, I have gone way above and beyond with my lists here. If you have just one or two bullet points in this area of um, ethical considerations, that's perfectly acceptable. If you're having trouble identifying, what could I put here, feel free to email me and I can help you through that, or I'll give you some ideas, okay? So good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.